seeking the council's endorsement really of a plan for the future of the library. The library is kind of an odd duck this way. It's got the two sources of revenue, the tax revenue, of course, and then we've got the gift revenue. And back in, I think it was '05, a decision was made by the folks in charge at that time of the library that they would, instead of managing their own gift funds, that they would have the city do it for them as a convenience. And it's been a convenience. It's been really nice to have that. But what's happened for us internally is we've had with all due respect to the library director, I think we've had some confusion and a little bit of difficulty with our letting the city know exactly where the board's at on certain things. And I think that's created a little bit of a cloud of dust on this. But what's happened in reality is we have a strategic planning process that we're involved in. We're just really in the beginning stages of it. But one of the first things in that discussion that came up was what should we do about gift funds? We're going to try to raise some money for some things in the near future. One of the big ones is this addition that we're hoping to do in a few years. I mean, it's not immediate, but like with anything, you want to start thinking well before the event to make sure you're positioned properly as an organization. One of the things in our discussions, our preliminary discussions in our strategic plan were what would a donor, how would a donor view Eager Free when it's going to gift or decide to gift? And interestingly, because of a snafu, a communication difficulty with our director, I'll let you be blunt, we fell behind on a measurement of how much we would have to buy in books for this ALS requirement a while ago. And so we had to actually do a mini fundraiser in that, and that sort of opened our eyes to why people would buck giving the library money. And one of the #1 complaints they had is we pay taxes, why should we gift? And then if we do gift, will the money stay with the library or be commingled with the city funds? Well, everybody here knows that the money with the city is earmarked and specifically will only go for the library purpose, which is understandable. And just knowing that, I'm completely comfortable leaving it with the city in that sense. However, in further reflection, it became clear to us that it's more of a perception problem. A person donating, they're not going to spend the time investigating the details of how the funds are held. And there's another element to it in our minds is that an entity needs to build its own credibility. It has to show that it can do certain things. And as long as we have the city taking care of the gift funds for us in the way that it does, which is very, very nice, it takes away our ability to say that we're handling them in the proper way as far as accounting and transparency and what have you. So part of our plan is to put together, I mean, we've started some preliminary things on it, a method for tracking the gifts, accounting for them, and so as you can see, I see you have a policy yourself you're putting together on donations for the city, a similar program for these funds. So that coupled with the idea that we interviewed a bunch of other libraries, because a lot of other libraries do, and a lot of other libraries, not 100%, but a large majority of them do have trust funds for gifts separate from the tax funds that come rolling in. So it's not an uncommon thing to have them be separate. It's probably less common to have them the way we have it versus having it with the library itself. And I think it is because of the experience of fundraisers and people knowing that it's going to that entity and staying with that entity. That's probably more than you wanted to hear, but hopefully that gives you the background plus the letter there. So that's really what I guess why we're asking for this opportunity and the endorsement of the city and the council for our plan. Because in my mind's eye, that's as important as anything, is to have the city actually vote and decide to do it. To basically say that, yeah, we believe in this organization and its board of trustees. It's important for us to have you vote this way versus do something like or say, well, we'll just take money out of that one and we'll start this other fund or something that has our tax ID number. For me, that's hogwash. I think you have to have the endorsement of the city behind it too, to make it credible. So hopefully that all makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. And then the rest of the letters, we did look at the idea of a formal foundation. I think that's still on the table for us, but that has quite a bit of expense and an administrative aspect to it that we have to weigh, because we as with the city, anything coming to us is already tax exempt. Typically, that's why you go through that hullabaloo. But it also have the formalities help with the credibility too. So we haven't ruled that out. We have to go further in our strategic plan on whether we'll go that route with the funds. It's currently about 11,000. I think that's probably right. It's in that account.
I saw that number somewhere.
Yeah, maybe not more like 9.
Approximately.
Oh, 29,000 in it?
Who's around that?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, just a little.
I don't know. I don't know how much it is.
Any other questions, comments up here?
Making a note here quick.
Oh,
We talked at length a month ago about control and disagreed on what control is, means, looks like.
2 months ago, 2 months ago.
Is it, okay,
Come on.
they're starting to run together. The funds are in the library's control to disperse.
Right.
The library entity has final and only decision on how those funds are spent.
Correct.
So it's just a matter of creating a checkbook outside the city books.
That's right. That's an important part of it. That in the auditing.
Is it 2 years ago that we changed, that we were required to change how we treated, and I'm gonna lose the terminology, but like the EMS, the separate funds
But there are ones that you can have
for purposes
pursuant
of
to
the audit.
statute,
But,
and library's one of them.
but we did, at that time, change the way we treated library fund to bring it into the audit. Is that fair to say, or is that?
Would that be the tax portion though, or would that be?
Well, that's
No.
the audit.
I think it was the gift portion. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. It wasn't being recognized in our city audit.
So it was halfway in,
Yeah.
probably, and now it's all the way in, and I appreciate that. That auditing aspect is appreciated. There's another way for us to do that ourselves. We've contacted Rob County on that to find out what exactly it would entail, and he's geared up to help us with that if we choose to, if this is the way that it goes. And I think, again, I appreciate that point, but the reality is that if we can show that we're doing it, I feel that helps us say we're credible. Like, I really appreciate the fact that once you get the funds, it's hard to envision this particular group. It's really odd, isn't it, compared to other departments that you have. But the reality is that we're thinking about fundraisers in a way that we want to be able to say that when the funds come in here and they stay here, and they're audited by us, a credibility point, right? We manage them carefully and transparently, a credibility point. I feel like if we give up any of those credibility points as a library, we give up donations. Because donors, they sniff it around. I do a lot of estate planning, and a lot of times it's charitable giving that's on there. And the first question I ask is, can you find out stuff about this organization? And the first things you do is you call and you find out where the money's going in and how it's going out, and whether it's being touched at any point by third parties. As soon as, just to be frank, as soon as we discover as a donor that the city might have a touch point, even though we know in this room that it's locked down, they just repel. They'll go to another charity with that money. And frankly, there's enough of a battle getting funds, as we all know, doing other fundraisers. Well, I put artificial hurdles up, and I'm not dismissing the benefit. There's been a huge benefit having the city do this. I think that's why in '05 they made the decision, but I guess we've just sort of learned that it's probably better for us to do this. Now, if this isn't successful, let's just say, or it doesn't seem to be strong in the knees as it should be, we could always put the money back in the city. Is that true? I think so.
Same way it happened.
I would think so,
Yeah.
but I think that the point is that then the board has to, let's just say the board has to grow up, the library board. The library board is gonna grow up now, it's gonna show that it can do all these aspects, and I believe it can. We're serious about it, we got the strategic plan started, and so I think that as much as it's been appreciated that all those things have occurred, it's time for the board to take this stuff on, including the checkbook. And that, again, I'm publicly saying things about individuals that are involved in the library, but I don't think you've gotten a clear message about this till today, and that, or with my letter, hopefully it's become more clear.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think.
apologize for that.
Well, and I think that one of the biggest reasons the council made known, and one of the reasons I felt strongest about was the library board it came to us. It didn't very well seem like there was a complete understanding, and by the library board it was the director and I believe one board member. And I don't believe that there was a complete and clear understanding that there still was control of those funds. And when asked more specifically, the fundamental question, why?
Right, if it wasn't answered,
Wow.
it sounds like.
Well, the answer was because. And in my house, that doesn't go over very well. We expect a little more.
That's my way too, Mason, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, and that was interesting. And I'll tell you, after talking with you, reading the letter, and hearing your comments today, I mean, I think that in regards to fundraising and the fact that there is that, it's all about perception. It really is. At the end of the day, this is all about perception. And even if these funds are still completely earmarked and segregated for the library and whatever the board intends on doing with these gift funds, you still have the problem with perception, and you can't make that public. And I understand your point, and I think especially with some of the things in the current capital plan on the horizon, it's important that the library board has all the tools that they need in order to really hit the fundraising as hard as they can. Now, on the other hand, in hearing, this would be our third presentation on this. We've had one at finance before and another one at council, and Wally, you're doing great. The other two weren't very clear, and it didn't seem as if we did not get the same picture of the vision that you've laid out before us. And I think it's important for us to know that the library board is unified in this vision, and not only that, but everyone understands obviously the importance of the responsibility, accountability, in order to achieve the credibility that you're looking for.
Might I speak to that?
Please.
It's a good point, and it's actually part of what's happened as a result of what's going on. For one thing, I guess I should have been more aware, but I wasn't aware of how the other two. I mean, they reported back and they said, well, we gave a discussion about the gifting, and we feel pretty good about how it went or whatever. But we didn't really hear. I got the same kind of detail that basically the city got. But after discussing it with the board in detail, what I put together for you was reviewed by all the board members, and they said, you know what, you finally put into words what we're all trying to do. And what's really helped to solidify our thoughts is the strategic planning. I'm not a big fan of strategic planning, to be honest with you. I think, frankly, half the time it's a waste of time. I daydream through a lot of it, but the strategic plan has helped us to have a more unified and cohesive thought process. I do think, though, that we have to continue to look at becoming better leaders in our board. Our board, initially, in 2006 or so when I started, we really showed up, listened to what the director said and left. We weren't active. And we've learned through bumps and bruises, we've had to be more active and slowly become more educated and more involved in the actual operation. So I don't know if it's better or worse to have a board that's involved in the operation as we've become, but we have actually transformed into something that we weren't, and even in the last 2 or 3 months that's happened. So that I can see where what you're saying makes sense. We're even learning in the last 2 or 3 months when we started our strategic planning about that, that we need to be more clear with how we present ourselves to the public, to our patrons, and to basically the city, 3 of our major audiences. I think God's a 4th, maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's a little spiel on that. Yeah, I think we're on our way there. We've got work to do, but we're on our way.
Well, the process then that the board would have, that the library, if this went down that path, would be to approve it as a board, any of those expenses of gifted monies anyway, correct? Just as though council would do
Yeah,
if the
exactly.
city got control.
Well, they already do that, I think. They approve expenses and then it comes.
And then it comes to council and that, but
We do, but we're gonna have an accounting by our treasurer every meeting. The treasurer's gonna be bonded.
yeah,
We're gonna do some things like that to make sure that we've got this, it's like I say, a lot of it is, boy, it sure is a lot more convenient to have the city hold the money. But the reality is that we've learned that if we wanna do this right as far as the fundraising, we have to devote the bullet to do this, so.
speaking of transparency, I find it interesting that even in this letter that after research and review, there's still uncertainty as to whether it's 11,000 or 29,000.
Well,
And I guess I question, and I could be stepping on some toes, but I question the transparency of the system that's in place now. Because I think that should have been something that was already probably by the time this letter was written, should have been very clear. One more thing. I've heard a couple times reference to a specific individual tonight, and I can't speak to all of that person's performance, but I know that person was somewhat chastised at the last meeting too when the word control was used. And I think that it's important to recognize that some of us are better public speakers than others. And I really don't I think the points were trying to be made, and maybe that was difficult to articulate, but under the sense that I got of someone was chastising, I think it probably just made it all that much more difficult to articulate. So I just want to throw that out there in the defense of that individual, that specific time.
I appreciate that. I think it is difficult for some people, and I think that's where we have to maybe think about making a change as a library board about who brings things to the
That too,
city.
yeah.
So, or to make sure that it depending on what it is delivered, that it's delivered carefully. And it's funny because you think that would come natural, but let's face it, we all have our blind sides. We're really great at this piece, and maybe another piece is a weakness. And unfortunately, and it's a sign of the times too. Let's imagine that the budgets were more rosy than they are now, and we didn't have so many issues related to budget concerns. If for instance, an individual, great at a number of things, but there's a blind spot, and it becomes so obvious when the situation changes to exposure.
Right.
And I'm afraid that the public speaking and budget issues really made it obvious, and unfortunately, it not only impacted the situation with that person, but also with the board and the library itself. And,
Well, then it slows down the process as well, because then it requires another meeting and another meeting.
But all that being said, I think the future is what we look to try to make it a better thing than what it's been as far as that piece. Yeah, I appreciate the comments, though, Todd, and I think that's important to remember too.
I'm a huge fan of strategic planning.
Yeah, I figured you would be.
And used properly, used well, it can really help keep an organization on track. And one of the first things that needs to come out of that is a consistent message. You can't strat plan every couple of years and then change the message. It's got to be consistent down the line. I look at your letter, your history. In 2005, we changed it because it was convenient. Now we're asking to change it back, but if that doesn't work, we'll put it back into the city accounts. All of this became apparent just within the last few months because it had not been tracked well.
Yep.
I'd be much more comfortable having this discussion if we had some sort of a record of, under the current system of checks and balances back and forth, if we had some record of the library board having tracked their investments worked with Lisa to keep up to date, made sure they knew what the current status was of all of those. I appreciate the concerns about contributions and third-party involvement, I really do. I think it's unfair. I mean, we're all the city, and those kinds of concerns that, well, the city's gonna take this, I think are unfair. But I worry about the back and forth nature of it, having the funds where they can be audited without extra expense. I think gives some credibility to the safety of those funds. It's under the city's audit and is being watched that way.
I can respond a little bit to
But can I respond first? I've got a couple of issues with that. And first one is, historically, we still are not 100% certain how this transition occurred. And one of the things, and the most information that we got out of it was the director at the time simply did it. And there wasn't even a vote by the board, from what we know.
I don't think there was.
And secondly, I would counter with, I mean, really at the end of the day, how is the board supposed to show that they can do this without doing it? I mean, basically that's, I'm not very good at balancing a checkbook, but I mean, I could do that if I'm looking over someone's shoulder who's doing it for me. Those are my issues with it.
Yeah, I think I didn't bring probably the props I needed, I guess, but there is a spreadsheet that indicates who gave and when they gave and where the funds are. There is kind of an odd thing that there's a portion of funds that aren't in the city, and some is, it's kind of so it does have some ironing out that needs to be done, but there's an understanding, a good starting point for this process, and actually we've jumped ahead with it a little bit and categorized the Ramsey funds, say, one of the families. I have the experience of being with the Evansville Fund for 6 years before today. This is my first year now being on it since I've been a citizen of Evansville. And that experience to me, it helped me see what we need to do as far as the way that they handle their funds and reported it is a model we're hoping to plan. So I think the future, again, like I say, is probably hard to measure by the past because of the way things went. I appreciate what you're saying about looking at what's happening, going, not sure if I'm confident about the future, but I guess what I'm saying is the future shouldn't look anything like the past if this goes the way it should, and I think it will. I guess the only reason I said that we could shift it back is because I guess I thought maybe that would be helpful for you, because you could say, well, there's one more safety, but the plan is not to have that happen. For instance, it didn't happen from the beginning of the library in the 1800s till 2005. To 2005, they were all held by the library privately. It's only been a small blip where it's gone to the city, which, like I say, hasn't been a bad thing. It's just been something that we learned maybe wasn't as wise as the director might have thought it was.
I'm concerned that we don't know how or why it was done, therefore we need to rush to undo it quickly and without understanding why it went this way, rushing to undo it without.
How can that be determined?
I think we tried to find it
Yeah,
out.
and that's,
I mean, I think we're at that dead end
Right.
with that information.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say.
I think we've gotten as far as we're gonna get.
We checked it, yeah.
But it's, as you say, it's possible to track those funds, where they are, where they came from. And with some track record of working with the city, I think it's possible to build the credibility that you're looking to show. I think it's possible. That's all I have, thank you.
Anything else, Todd?
No, other than a motion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm prepared to make that motion. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm cemented into it, but I think it's fair for the entire council to hear that. to hear your perspective.
Sure.
And I think it's fair that the council hear Jim and other council members' thoughts on the subject. So I will make the motion to recommend to council a transition in the stewardship of gift funds for the library from the city to the library board.
Second.
And
And you avoided control.
I think we probably need a roll on that just to be safe.
Brooks.
Aye.
Collinson.
Aye.
Gundry.
So you'll get a chance to make your case at council. I think it would be nice if you get as many members of the board here as you possibly could. Frankly, I don't even know who's on the board anymore. I'd like to see that. Okay, all right, thanks. Thanks,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thanks, Wally.